Imagine being locked in a bathroom the size of a large closet. No windows to the outside world. The walls so thin you can hear men with machetes searching the house on the other side. Now imagine staying there for 91 days, 8 women, one tiny room, no speaking above a whisper. The killers would pass through that house over a dozen times. Each time, death was separated from them by nothing more than a thin wooden door and a wardrobe pushed against it. This is the true story of Immaculée Ilibagiza, a young Rwandan woman who entered that bathroom as a carefree university student, weighing 115 pounds, and emerged 3 months later weighing 65, having lost nearly everything she had ever loved. This is the story of one of the most brutal genocides of the 20th century, seen through the eyes of a woman who chose, against all human instinct, to respond with forgiveness. This is left to tell. To understand what Immaculée Ilibagiza lost, you first have to understand what she had. She grew up in Mataba, a small village in western Rwanda, in a home filled with laughter, faith, and an unusually progressive father. Leonard Ilibagiza was a school teacher who believed deeply in education, especially for his daughter. In a country where many girls were kept at home, Immaculée was sent to the best schools he could find. Rwanda in the early 1990s was a country of extraordinary beauty. A land of 1,000 hills, they called it. Green, lush, draped in mist. Immaculée described her childhood home as a paradise. Her parents were devoted Catholics. Her brothers were her best friends. The family had enough, a home, a garden, goats. Simple, but whole. There was tension in Rwanda, as there had been for decades. The country's population was divided between two groups, the Hutu majority and the Tutsi minority, and the political fault lines between them ran deep. The colonial powers that once ruled Rwanda had amplified these divisions, issuing identity cards that permanently labeled every citizen as one or the other. But for Immaculée, growing up, these tensions felt distant. Her father had Hutu friends, her mother had Hutu friends. The village seemed to exist above the politics. In 1993, Immaculée was accepted to the National University of Rwanda on a full scholarship. She was 22 years old, brilliant, hopeful, and on the cusp of everything she had worked for. She went home for Easter break in April 1994 to visit her family. She would never return to university, and she would never again see most of the people she loved. On April 6, 1994, a plane was shot out of the sky over Kigali. On board was the president of Rwanda. Within hours, the radio crackled to life with a message that would end the world as Immaculée knew it. The voice on the radio was calm, almost clinical. It announced that President Habyarimana was dead. Then it said something else, something that would set in motion the slaughter of nearly 1 million people in 100 days. It said, "Cut down the tall trees." This was the code. The tall trees was a slur for Tutsi people, who were often stereotyped as tall. The message was a call to genocide. Within hours, roadblocks appeared across the country, manned by Hutu extremists known as the Interahamwe, armed with machetes, lists, and a murderous ideology that had been building for years. Immaculée was at home with her family when the news broke. Her father, Leonard, listened to the radio with a face she had never seen on him before, pale, still afraid. He told Immaculée she had to leave immediately. There was a Hutu pastor named Marinzi in a town nearby. Her father trusted him. She had to go to him now. Immaculée begged to stay. Her father refused. He told her brothers they would be fine, the men of the family would be safe. He was wrong. He could not have known how wrong he was. Immaculee hugged her father. She hugged her mother. She looked at her brothers' faces, Damascene, Vianney, Amable. She did not say a real goodbye. She didn't know she needed to. She walked out the door and down the road to the pastor's house, moving quickly, not looking back. Behind her, the hills that had always felt like home were beginning to fill with smoke. It was the last time she ever saw her mother and most of her brothers. Her father would survive a few months more, hiding, moving between houses, before he too was killed. He was murdered in a church, a place he had believed his whole life that God lived. By the time it was over, the Rwandan genocide had killed between 500,000 and 800,000 Tutsi people. Entire families, entire villages, erased in weeks. The killers were not soldiers. They were neighbors. They were colleagues. In some cases, they were friends. Pastor Marinzi was a complicated man. He was Hutu. He could have turned Immaculee away. He could have turned her in. Instead, he did something extraordinarily dangerous. He hid her. In the back of his house was a small bathroom, roughly 3 feet by 4 feet. He led Immaculee and 7 other Tutsi women to it and told them to get inside. He pushed a large wardrobe in front of the door. Then he left. 8 women. A space barely large enough for one. No room to sit without pressing against each other. A small ventilation hole near the ceiling, their only connection to the outside air. They stayed there for 91 days. The pastor brought food when he could, sometimes once a day, sometimes not at all. The women grew thinner, their legs cramped. They could not stand fully upright. They communicated in gestures and mouthed words, terrified that any sound would give them away. And the killers came. Again and again the Interahamwe searched the house. Immaculee could hear them on the other side of the thin wall, demanding to know if the pastor was hiding Tutsis. On at least one occasion, the killers were in the bedroom directly outside the bathroom, hunting through the room, their voices close enough to touch. The wardrobe stood between the women and death. One of the most harrowing moments came when one of the hiding women whispered the name of the local killer who was leading the searches. It was a man Immaculee's family had known, a man who had played at their home. He was now hunting her. In the darkness of that bathroom, with death on the other side of the wall, something happened to Immaculee that she would spend the rest of her life trying to explain. She prayed, not the desperate, bargaining prayer of pure panic, though there was some of that too. She prayed the rosary, hour after hour, day after day. She prayed until the words became something else, a kind of anchor, a rope she could hold on to when everything else had disintegrated. She also began to teach herself English, using a French-English dictionary and a Bible that the pastor had left her. In the darkness, starving, surrounded by death, she was studying. She told herself that when, not if, she survived, she would need English to move forward in life. She refused to accept that she would not survive. But the hardest battle was not with the killers outside. It was with the hatred growing inside her. She could feel it forming, a dark, hot thing in her chest, when she thought about what was being done to her people, to her family. The human response to genocide is not passive grief. It is fury, and Immaculee felt it and was frightened by it. She would later write that she spent weeks wrestling with the question, how do you pray to a God of love when the world outside is being butchered? How do you hold faith together when faith itself seems to be one of the weapons being used to destroy your people? She did not resolve it easily, but she resolved it. In mid-July 1994, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, a Tutsi-led rebel group that had been fighting from Uganda, finally broke through and took control of Kigame. The genocide was ending. The killers were fleeing. French peacekeeping forces arrived in the area. Pastor Morenzi told the women it was time to go. The wardrobe was moved. The door opened. Immaculee stepped out into the light. She weighed 65 pounds. She was 22 years old, and she looked, by her own account, like a skeleton wrapped in skin. The women had survived, all 8 of them. The French soldiers who helped escort them to safety were visibly shaken when they saw the state of the women. Immaculee could barely walk. Her legs had wasted away. The world outside the bathroom, the roads, the trees, the sky, felt enormous and overwhelming, as if she had forgotten how to exist in it. And then came the information she had been holding herself back from fully believing. Her mother was dead, killed early in the genocide. Her brother Damascene, the one she was closest to, her intellectual companion, her friend, had been caught and murdered. Her brother Vianney, too. Her father Leonard, who had sent her to safety that first day, who had believed wrongly, that the men of the family would be spared, had survived for months hiding before being killed. Only one of her brothers, Aimable, who had been out of the country when the genocide began, was still alive. Immaculee later wrote about the moment she received this news. She describes sitting in the French camp and feeling the grief hit her like a physical force, a wave that had been building for 91 days, held back by the necessary numbness of survival, now finally breaking. She wept, she prayed, and then she made a decision that most people hearing her story find almost incomprehensible. She went to find the man who had led the mob that killed her family. His name was Felician. He had been a successful businessman. His children had played with Immaculee and her brothers. He had eaten at her family's table. He had been captured and was being held in a local jail. Immaculee asked to see him. The authorities allowed it. When they brought Felician out, she barely recognized him. He had changed, diminished. He stood before her in filthy clothes, trembling, unable to meet her eyes. He was clearly expecting rage. He was expecting what any reasonable person would have brought to that room. Immaculee looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "I forgive you." The guard who was with her was furious. He told her that forgiveness was a betrayal of her family, that men like Felician deserved death, not grace. Immaculee listened to him. She understood the argument. She had made that argument to herself in the dark for 3 months, but she had arrived somewhere else. She has explained this moment in many interviews and in the book itself. She is careful to say that forgiveness is not the same as saying that what happened was acceptable. It is not amnesia. It is not a gift to the perpetrator. It is, she argues, a gift to yourself, a release from the prison of hatred that, if you hold it long enough, begins to destroy you more thoroughly than your enemy ever could. In that bathroom, she had realized something. The killers outside were also suffering, consumed by a hatred that had been taught to them, that had hollowed them out, that had turned them into instruments of something monstrous. She did not excuse them, but she saw them as human, broken, terrible human. Forgiveness for Immaculee was not weakness. It was the hardest, most deliberate act of her life. It was a choice she made actively over and over, against the pull of every natural instinct she had. It was also, she would say, the thing that saved her, not from the genocide, but from becoming a casualty of it in a different way, long after the killing had stopped. Immaculée Ilibagiza did not stop in Rwanda. She made her way to New York, where she landed a job at the United Nations, a position she had told herself she would get. In the dark of that bathroom, while teaching herself English from a dictionary, she married, she built a life. She became a public speaker, traveling the world to talk about her experience, not as a story of victimhood, but as a testimony about the human capacity for both destruction and grace. In 2006, she published Left to Tell. It became an international bestseller. Millions of people, from genocide survivors to combat veterans to people struggling with far smaller but no less real griefs, wrote to her saying it had changed them. She has returned to Rwanda many times. She has spoken in front of the Rwandan parliament. She has advocated for reconciliation programs that bring Hutu perpetrators and Tutsi survivors into the same room, attempting the almost impossible work of rebuilding a country that tried to destroy itself. The bathroom where she hid still exists. She has visited it as an adult. She described it as feeling impossibly small, even smaller than the memory, which had always seemed small enough. She sometimes says that what happened to her was not a story about Rwanda, or about genocide, or even about her. It is a story about what happens to the human spirit when it is pushed past every limit. And what happens, she argues, is that it does not always break. Sometimes, rarely at great cost, through deliberate and agonizing effort, it finds a way through. Immaculée Ilibagiza lost almost everything. Her home, her country, the family she loved, the future she had planned. What she did not lose, what she refused to let be taken from her, was the capacity to choose who she would become on the other side of the worst thing that ever happened to her. That, perhaps, is what Left to Tell is really about. If this story moved you, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.